All right, guys, so it's range time with the P320 X carry. And what you're going to see here in the first clip of shooting is going to be the first, let me think now, 30 rounds of shooting. I have three magazines, 10 rounds apiece. I know that sucks for most free people, but that's the best we got here. So in a minute, you're going to see here this little whoopsie moment, of course, with my phone. So, you know, you got to stop shooting, you got to pick it up. But nonetheless, what are my first impressions of the first 30 rounds? Not too good. Actually, I guess you could say the recoil was a little bit more surprising than I thought. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say this is the snappiest gun I've ever shot, because it certainly is not. However, with that being said, this gun had a little bit more recoil than I was expecting initially. So it definitely threw me off a little bit. The sights also, I think, are a little bit weird in regards to the height of them. They're very small. They're very, very small. And you would think that a gun that has the ability to mount an optic would have a little bit of higher of a sight, especially in the rear. But they're very tiny, so they were kind of hard to pick up. So you can see the first 30, you know, a couple in the red there, but a lot of low. The next 30 rounds that I'm going to put through this gun, I'm going to start actually closing things in a little bit more, although still not very good. So it actually took me about, I don't know, I want to say about 45 rounds to really start feeling comfortable shooting the handgun in regards to how the muzzle flip rose and then getting back on target. So the trigger wasn't the problem. The trigger was very responsive. The trigger is actually very good in this handgun overall. But again, for me, going back and forth from different guns that day, you definitely see there's a difference in shooting. And like I said prior, this gun felt a little bit snappier, and I think that's what really threw me off a little bit. But once I managed on how to control the gun better, how to change my grip around that gun and be able to bring that gun faster back on target, the groups are going to start to close up a little bit more as this target gets drawn back. And what you're going to see here is that it is a little spotty as well on the bottom, although you're seeing a little bit more coming into that red as well. As I push the target a little bit further out in this one, again, this is going to be my, I won't say my last 30, but for this video purposes, it's just going to be the last 30 rounds. Although I did put about 250 through the gun, the day got better. And I've noticed that with myself personally as a shooter, that when you're shooting one handgun and then you switch over to the next, there's a little bit of an adjustment time. Maybe not for all you experts out there, but certainly for me. And one of the things I'm going to say is I started shooting this gun more. I was able to pick up the pace a little bit. More importantly, getting a little bit more accurate as I went on. And I do have to say this gun is a very, very good shooting gun. Once you get used to how that recoil works, it is very, very easy to shoot. And it's actually very fun to shoot because the trigger on this thing was absolutely on point. Although I'm going to say at the end, once I was done shooting this gun, there was a lot of heat being generated on the frame, but we'll talk more about that at the table. But overall, the Sig P320 X carry is pretty solid. And as you guys see this target coming back here in a second, you're going to see that the groupings started to get a little bit better over time. And I've got to say, I was fairly pleased with the day. All right, guys, welcome back to the table. So you saw the shooting review, or I could say the small range review in regards to shooting the handgun. And one of the biggest things that I'm going to say right off the bat in regards to my overall feelings on how this gun shot, it was kind of different. I think that's the best way to describe how I felt shooting the gun. The reason why I say that is because the P320X carry is a long grip and a 3.8 inch slide. I believe it's a 3.8 inch slide. You guys can correct me, but I'm pretty sure. So you have that long grip, and to kind of give you a comparison of how long the grip is, I'm going to give you an idea in regards to the Masada. I'll put the empty magazine. Both guns are cleared, so don't freak out. But that's a Sig P320. Here's the Masada that's going to go right on top of it. And interestingly enough, there's really no difference between the two. You can see that the distance, or I should say the size difference between the Masada's magazine baseplate versus the Sig is that the magazine baseplate on the Masada is a little bit lower, or I should say, I guess, thicker compared to this one. Other than that, the difference in length is negligible in regards to the grip. Again, the Masada will have a longer slide. So you can see that right there. But other than that, this is probably the best comparable gun that I could say maybe to a Glock 19X, that type of deal, 45. And if you like that long grip with that shorter slide, this would be a very good recommendation for you. I personally like the way the feel of this gun actually operates. There's a pretty good balance point to it, so you don't really feel like this slide is too big or too heavy compared to the grip. And that is always something that I thought about in the old P320s that I've owned. It always felt that it was very top heavy. This gun does not. And I thought that was kind of cool because You don't really necessarily see that a lot with guns. Sometimes what you're going to find is that sometimes the gun may look cool and then you put it in your hand and it feels unbalanced. It feels like the top is too heavy in regards to the length or the actual length of the grip. In this case, it's a very good balanced feel, especially when you shoot it. Also, one of the things I noticed when I was shooting this handgun is that the thickness of the grip on the bottom is kind of interesting because they do this undercut here, or whatever you want to call that, in regards to your hand, your finger. So your middle finger gets a nice tight purchase around the actual grip of the handgun. So you're actually able to get almost like this thinner feel right here because this finger is going in deeper into the actual grip. The bottom portion is actually a little bit thicker, but what I did notice is that thickness actually works really well for your support hand. It gives it a very nice landing pad, so to speak, to lay that support hand on so that you're making pretty good contact with this portion of the handgun. And I thought that was kind of cool as well, especially when I was shooting it. Now, one of the things that I think interested me the most about this handgun is the recoil impulse that I felt. I don't want to mislead anybody into thinking that somehow this is a nasty, snappy handgun, because it's really not. It actually is a very smooth feeling handgun. But when I started to shoot it initially, it's hard to explain, but the gun actually felt like there was a little bit more recoil than I had expected. You know, when I see a gun this big and really this heavy, one of the things that I would think of is the fact that this is not going to recoil or be snappy. When I shot at the first probably, 30 to 50 rounds, it took a little getting used to in regards to the way that recoil felt. Now, it wasn't overpowering. It just seemed like the muzzle rise was a lot greater than some of the other guns that I carry or have shot before, which could be just the idea that, you know, you're riding a little bit higher on the slide. I mean, you can see where your hand is compared to where the reciprocation of the slide is. Big word. But that could have a possible effect on it. And maybe not. Again, everybody's going to be different on what they feel when they're shooting a handgun, but that was my initial impression. But interestingly enough, even with that recoil, as I was feeling that recoil impulse wanting to go up, the gun came immediately down back on target, which was kind of interesting because, again, you get a little bit of a snappier rise on the gun, but immediately it just comes right down. I think that has to do with the beaver tail being pretty thick, as you guys can see right there. It's a fairly thick beaver tail, so it does allow it really to encase your hand. So even if you've got a little bit of muzzle rise, you're not going to necessarily feel that gun rising out of your hand out of control because that beaver tail is going to really cinch it down for you. Finger position, I didn't have any problems with the slide not locking back, which I think is a big plus. A lot of times, I tend to ride very high, so you can see where my thumb is. A lot of times I'll hit that slide lock, slide release, which does not allow the slide to lock back. In this case, I did not have that problem at all. As a matter of fact, even with the takedown lever, it really does provide a nice point of reference for your support hand to get that thumb to ride on there. But other than that, I really felt very good with the gun. The targets may not show that initially, but again, I was shooting a couple of different guns that day, but this gun shoots better than I do, obviously. And I have to say that ultimately, I think this would be a really good bargain for you guys to go out and get. Now, there have been some questions about the gun. I made a reference to the idea that this was law enforcement only, and I stand by that. And the reason why I say that is because these are only at law enforcement distributors. So if you know an LEO distributor, you probably can pick this gun up there if they allow to have that. However, if you've noticed anybody trying to sell these, it'll ask for those credentials. So I'm going to stand by that until proven wrong, and maybe I will be, maybe I won't be. Honestly, it is what it is at this point. Now, in regards to the trigger, first off, I've already, done something with the trigger. I showed you in the previous video, which by the way has done very well, and I really appreciate you guys watching it. But one of the things that I have to say to this Apex trigger, the take up on the stock trigger was really slight. It wasn't a lot, so there wasn't a lot of play on that trigger. And then it hits a certain wall, and then it breaks at 90 degrees. With the Apex trigger, it's ridiculous. Like, this is your take up right here. That's it. That's your take up. And then there's your break. You can see there's very little movement between the take up of the trigger and then where that actually breaks, but it also does break in that 90 degree as well. The reset on the gun, again, stock trigger was very good. The Apex trigger, I think, has improved it slightly. And right there, that's where it is. It is ridiculously smooth. It is a really, really nice handgun. Again, I didn't necessarily think you needed to upgrade it with the Apex. The Apex does adds a little bit more to the trigger in regards to the shortened take up and maybe a little bit more controllable reset. But the stock trigger on this was very good to shoot. I had no issues with it. The one thing that I would also mention is that after shooting about 250 through this thing right now, The one thing that I noticed, which was kind of interesting, was, and this is the first time I actually felt this with a Sig, or really any gun for that matter, was this sucker gets hot. I did 250 rounds. I wasn't really taking a breather between them because the gun was fun to shoot. But I'll tell you, man, this chassis inside here, it actually gets very hot. It was getting hot to the touch for my thumb. And I could definitely feel it over here as well. And when you touch this right there, which is the other side of your takedown lever, this sucker right here was blazing hot. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Again, what is the likelihood of you running 250 rounds through a gun right away? Probably very slim to none in regards to like a self-defense situation or of sorts. But at the same time, that was just something that I've noticed, or I did notice when I initially shot the handgun. I mean, overall, the gun is really good. You guys know, if you watch this channel, I'm not a huge fan of the SIGs. Really the polymer SIGs. I like the metal SIGs, but the polymer SIGs I've never really fallen in love with. I think this has a lot of potential. As a matter of fact, this gun is coming along very well. If I was going to change anything else, the X-ray sights are okay. I didn't necessarily have any issues picking them up, but they're kind of small. And what I mean by that is that the sight picture is very, very small, very, very, I don't know. I guess for me, I'm used to having a little bit more of a wider stance in regards to the rear post or the rear sight versus the front post. In regards to this one, it's really not the case. There's very little ability to see that target through the notch there, which, some people like, some people don't. I don't know. They were okay. They're not great. I do not have an optic for this handgun at this point. Honestly, I don't even know if I'm going to get one right now because I do like the gun enough to be able to carry it in this configuration. There may be some other things coming down the pipeline that I may do with this gun. I may be looking at some adjustments to the grip module, maybe even something from another company that makes grip modules for this, and test that out to see if I like it any better. I mean, overall, the functions are great. The features are fantastic. The slide release, slide lock is very easy to manipulate. All the controls are ambidextrous. If you choose to switch over, you can do that for the left-handed shooter. But there really is nothing here to complain about in regards to this handgun. I really think Sig did a great job. I definitely like the fact that I have the co-witnessing ability on this Pro Series model. And overall, it did really well. You can even see that there's not a lot of wear on that slide or the barrel after 250 rounds, which is good. Honestly, if you're looking for a Sig and you're a fan of a Sig, you're going to love this gun. You really are. It may not be for everyone because there are people who are kind of questioning Sig's, I guess customer service, that kind of stuff in regards to some problems that people have had in the past. One of them being, of course, the Recoil on the original 320s and whether or not these are drop safe. I don't know how I feel about that just yet, especially since I showed you guys dropping it here actually allows the trigger to be operational. But I think overall, Sig did a nice job with this gun. I've been very pleased and very pleasantly surprised by this handgun, and it is definitely one that I would recommend. So tell me down in the comments below what you think about this gun. Do you like it? Do you think it's worth it? Is it one that you have, one that you've considered? And, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say about it, the gun as a whole. And that's about it. So I hope you guys have a great night. Stay safe. And as always, everyone, freedom is never free.